There's a fear that runs deep in the human psyche, the fear of being alone. We crave companionship, validation, and the warmth of connection. But what if I told you that being alone is often the better choice? What if I told you that staying in the wrong relationship with the wrong people can be far more destructive than facing solitude? Today I want to lay out 8 fundamental reasons why walking alone is not just preferable but necessary when the alternative is toxicity. Peace is not just the absence of conflict, it is the presence of mental clarity, emotional stability, and a sense of inner security. When you are alone, you have full control over your thoughts, emotions, and decisions. You are free to create a space where you can think clearly, process your emotions, and navigate life at your own pace. However, when you are entangled in a toxic relationship, that peace is stolen from you bit by bit until you no longer recognize yourself. Toxic relationships are mentally and emotionally exhausting. They create an atmosphere of unpredictability, where you never know if the next conversation will be a loving exchange or an emotional battle. One day you feel valued and appreciated, the next you are disregarded and made to feel insignificant. This constant roller coaster takes a toll on your mental health, leading to stress, anxiety, and even depression. Studies have shown that prolonged exposure to high conflict relationships can increase cortisol levels, the hormone responsible for stress, which can weaken the immune system, disrupt sleep patterns, and contribute to chronic illnesses. Consider a woman who is in a relationship with a manipulative partner. At first, everything seems perfect: affection, attention, and promises of a future together. But slowly the emotional abuse creeps in. She begins to feel controlled, criticized, and emotionally drained. She no longer recognizes the joyful, confident person she once was. Every interaction with her partner feels like walking on eggshells, and she finds herself constantly second-guessing her words and actions to avoid conflict. Even when she is physically alone, the emotional turmoil continues in her mind. The peace she once had is now replaced with a constant state of unease. Now imagine if she had chosen solitude instead of enduring that relationship. Yes, she would have faced moments of loneliness, but over time she would have rediscovered her inner peace. She would have been free to focus on herself, her ambitions, and her well-being without the weight of someone else's toxicity on her shoulders. Instead of living in a state of perpetual stress, she would have created a space for personal growth and healing. Being alone allows you to establish a sense of stability within yourself. You set the emotional tone for your environment. You are not subjected to unwarranted criticism, mind games, or the constant feeling of inadequacy. You are in control of your own happiness. And that control is something no toxic relationship can ever provide. The fear of loneliness often keeps people trapped in situations that are destroying them from the inside. They convince themselves that enduring pain is better than facing solitude, but what they fail to realize is that solitude is not the enemy, suffering in toxicity is. When you are alone, you have the opportunity to cultivate self-awareness, recognize your worth, and build the mental resilience needed to make better relationship choices in the future. At the end of the day, peace of mind is a priceless asset. It is the foundation of a fulfilling life. When you protect your peace by choosing solitude over toxicity, you are making a profound statement about your self-worth. You are saying, I deserve better than this. I deserve peace, clarity, and emotional freedom. And that choice alone has the power to transform your life. Your self-worth is the lens through which you see yourself and the foundation upon which you build your life. It determines the way you carry yourself, the boundaries you set, and the opportunities you pursue. But when you are caught in a toxic relationship, that foundation begins to erode. Slowly, your sense of value is rewritten by the person who mistreats you, and before you know it, you begin to believe the lies they tell you about yourself. The toxic individuals have a way of manipulating reality. They make you question your strengths, your intelligence, and even your ability to make decisions. They thrive on control, and one of the easiest ways to control someone is to make them doubt themselves. Over time, their words and actions seep into your subconscious, and you begin to see yourself through their distorted perspective. A prime example of this is gaslighting. a manipulative tactic used to make a person question their reality. A toxic partner might tell you that you're too sensitive when you express hurt over their actions, or they might deny saying something hurtful, making you question your own memory. Little by little, this psychological manipulation chips away at your confidence, making you dependent on them for validation. Now contrast that with being alone. When you are alone, you have the space to define yourself on your own terms. You are not subjected to the constant barrage of negativity that toxic people bring into your life. Instead, you have the opportunity to rebuild your self-esteem, recognize your strengths, and develop a healthy self-image. There is a powerful example of this in the lives of individuals who have walked away from abusive relationships. Many people, after finally breaking free from toxic environments, describe a feeling of rediscovering themselves. They start to remember the things they once loved, the hobbies they abandoned, and the dreams they suppressed. They begin to regain confidence in their own voice and decision-making. The weight that was once suffocating them is lifted, and they finally feel free to be themselves again. Furthermore, research supports the impact of toxic relationships on self-esteem. Studies have shown that people in emotionally abusive relationships often develop negative self-perceptions, struggle with self-doubt, and experience heightened levels of anxiety and depression. The longer they remain in these relationships, the more ingrained these negative beliefs become, making it even harder for them to leave. But the good news is that self-worth can be restored. When you choose to be alone, you create the space necessary for healing. You begin to recognize that your value does not depend on someone else's approval. You start to set healthier boundaries, ensuring that no one else will have the power to diminish your sense of self again. The reality is the way you see yourself determines the quality of your life. If you allow a toxic person to define your worth, you will always feel small, inadequate, and powerless. But when you reclaim that power by stepping away from toxicity, you open the door to a life where you are valued, respected, and treated with the dignity you deserve. Your self-worth should never be negotiable. It is not something that others have the right to dictate, and when you truly internalize that, you will never again settle for relationships that make you feel anything less than worthy. Growth is one of the most fundamental aspects of a fulfilling life. It is through growth that we evolve, find purpose, and reach our highest potential. Yet one of the greatest obstacles to growth is being stuck in an environment that limits you. Toxic relationships do exactly that. They keep you stagnant, preventing you from developing into the person you are meant to become. When you choose solitude over toxicity, you create an environment where real transformation can take place. Being alone gives you the space to reflect, reassess, and refine your understanding of yourself. You begin to notice patterns, both in yourself and in your interactions with others, that may have previously gone unnoticed. When you are constantly surrounded by negativity, your focus is often on survival rather than self-improvement. You are too busy managing someone else's emotions, too preoccupied with conflict, and too drained to invest in your own development. There is a reason why some of the most successful individuals have experienced long periods of solitude. Consider Nikola Tesla, one of history's most brilliant inventors. He spent years in solitude working on his ideas and theories, undistracted by external influences. His ability to detach from toxic distractions allowed him to create groundbreaking innovations that changed the world. While not everyone is meant to live in isolation, there is a valuable lesson here. Solitude provides the clarity and focus necessary for deep work and personal progress. Another example is J.K. Rowling, who was struggling as a single mother when she wrote Harry Potter. Instead of surrounding herself with people who doubted her abilities or tried to pull her down, she used her alone time to channel her creativity and develop one of the most successful book series of all time. Had she remained in an unsupportive environment, constantly battling negative energy, she might never have had the mental clarity to create something so impactful. Toxic relationships, on the other hand, consume energy that could otherwise be used for personal growth. If you are constantly caught up in unnecessary drama, walking on eggshells to avoid conflict, or second-guessing yourself due to manipulation, you are wasting valuable mental resources. The energy that should be used to build a better future is instead being drained by the toxic presence in your life. When you remove yourself from toxicity and embrace solitude, you create space for personal development. You can take up new hobbies, read books that expand your knowledge, and develop skills that will improve your life. You have time to set goals and make strategic plans for your future. More importantly, you can start working on your emotional intelligence, healing from past wounds, and building resilience. Another crucial aspect of growth is self-discovery. When you are alone, you are free to explore your true interests, beliefs, and desires without outside interference. Many people in toxic relationships lose touch with who they are because they spend so much time accommodating someone else's needs. They forget what they love, what excites them, and what truly brings them fulfillment. But when they step away, they start to rediscover those passions and reestablish their sense of identity. Ultimately, being alone is not a step backward, it is an opportunity to move forward. It is in solitude that you develop self-reliance, gain a deeper understanding of yourself, and cultivate the skills necessary for success. When you embrace alone time, you give yourself the best chance to grow into the strongest, most authentic version of yourself. One of the biggest reasons people stay in toxic relationships is the belief that they can fix the other person. They hold on to hope that with enough love, patience, and sacrifice, they can turn a toxic partner, friend, or family member into someone better. But this is a dangerous illusion, because change only happens when a person genuinely wants to change. The hard truth is that no amount of effort, kindness, or understanding can transform someone who refuses to acknowledge their flaws. Change is an internal process. It requires self-awareness, accountability, and the willingness to do the work. If a toxic person is unwilling to recognize their harmful behavior, then no amount of external influence will make a difference. Imagine a person trying to save a sinking boat. Every day they scoop out water with a bucket, desperately trying to keep the boat afloat. But what they don't realize is that the other person in the boat is drilling holes at the bottom. No matter how hard they try, they will never be able to fix the situation unless the other person stops sabotaging the effort. This is exactly what happens in toxic relationships. One person tries to repair what the other person is actively destroying. Consider someone who is in a relationship with a partner who is emotionally abusive. The victim tells themselves, if I just love them more, they will stop hurting me. Or if I can just prove my loyalty, they will finally appreciate me. But the reality is, no matter how much effort they put in, the toxic person will not change unless they recognize their own faults and choose to work on them. And in most cases, they don't. Instead, they continue the same cycle of manipulation and emotional damage, leaving the other person exhausted and broken. Psychologists have studied this phenomenon extensively. Studies show that individuals who engage in narcissistic or manipulative behavior rarely change unless they experience a personal crisis that forces them to reevaluate their actions. But even then, the change is not guaranteed. The mistake that many people make is believing that their love, support, and sacrifices will be enough to transform someone. Unfortunately, this belief keeps them trapped in a relationship that is ultimately damaging to their well-being. Another important aspect to consider is the cost of staying in a relationship where you are constantly trying to fix someone else. The longer you remain in that situation, the more drained you become. Your mental health suffers, your confidence erodes, and you begin to feel trapped in a cycle of disappointment. You might start blaming yourself, thinking that if you were just better, the toxic person would finally change. But this is not how real change works. People only change when they decide to. And more often than not, a toxic person will not change as long as they have someone enabling their behavior. In many cases, the only way to make them realize the impact of their actions is by leaving. When you walk away, you are sending a message that their behavior is unacceptable. You are setting a boundary that says, I will not sacrifice myself for someone who refuses to take responsibility for their actions. It is important to recognize that saving yourself is not the same as giving up on someone. It is not selfish to walk away from a toxic relationship. It is an act of self-preservation. You cannot control another person's growth, but you can control your own. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and the other person is to let them face the consequences of their own choices. At the end of the day, your responsibility is not to fix a toxic person. Your responsibility is to protect your own well-being. When you accept that truth, you free yourself from the burden of trying to change someone who was never willing to change in the first place. Many people fear being alone because they believe loneliness is unbearable. They assume that solitude will bring nothing but sadness, emptiness, and a sense of being unwanted. But what they fail to realize is that loneliness is a temporary feeling, whereas the damage caused by toxic relationships can have long-term consequences, emotionally, mentally, and even physically. Loneliness is something that can be managed, alleviated, and even transformed into a period of self-discovery. But staying in a toxic environment, hoping that things will improve, often results in years of emotional suffering. The wounds inflicted by toxic relationships do not just disappear when the relationship ends. They linger. They manifest in self-doubt, insecurity, trust issues, and sometimes even trauma that takes years to heal. Imagine someone who stays in a relationship where they are constantly belittled and criticized. Over time, they internalize these negative words and their self-worth begins to erode. Even if they leave the relationship years later, they often carry those wounds into their next relationships. They struggle to trust, fear expressing their emotions, and sometimes even believe that they are unworthy of love. This is the kind of lasting damage toxicity inflicts. Psychologists have long studied the effects of toxic relationships on mental health. Studies show that individuals in high conflict relationships have a significantly higher risk of developing anxiety and depression. In extreme cases, prolonged exposure to emotional or psychological abuse can lead to post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The nervous system becomes conditioned to anticipate stress, making it difficult to relax or feel safe, even in healthy relationships. Now, contrast this with being alone. Yes, loneliness can be uncomfortable, but it does not damage your sense of self the way toxicity does. In fact, loneliness can be an opportunity for personal growth. It is a period where you can focus on your own needs, rediscover your passions, and build the kind of life that aligns with your values. The discomfort of being alone fades over time, especially when you use that solitude to invest in yourself. One of the most powerful realizations people have after leaving a toxic relationship is how much peace they regain. They no longer have to constantly explain themselves, defend their worth, or anticipate the next argument. They are free to wake up each day without the weight of someone else's negativity pressing down on them. That sense of freedom is invaluable. The truth is, humans are adaptable. What seems unbearable at first, such as being alone, eventually becomes manageable. You learn to enjoy your own company, build new friendships, and create a life that brings fulfillment. But the damage of a toxic relationship does not simply fade away with time. It requires deep healing, self-reflection, and sometimes even therapy to undo the harm that has been done. And they do this through dreaming. This is why it is so crucial to choose solitude over toxicity. You can always overcome loneliness, but emotional damage is much harder to repair. When you stay in a toxic relationship out of fear of being alone, you are essentially making a deal that sacrifices your long-term well-being for short-term comfort, and that is never a trade worth making. The way people treat you is often a reflection of what you allow. When you stay in a toxic relationship, accepting mistreatment, manipulation, or emotional neglect, you send an unspoken message. This is okay. I will tolerate this. And the more you tolerate, the more the behavior continues. People are quick to blame toxic individuals for their harmful actions, and rightfully so. But at the same time, it is important to recognize that we have the power to set boundaries and walk away from situations that do not serve us. The moment you accept poor treatment without consequence, you are giving someone permission to keep treating you that way. Consider an employee who works under a boss that constantly disrespects them, belittles their efforts, dismisses their ideas, and takes credit for their work. If the employee stays silent, hoping that things will get better, the mistreatment continues. But the moment they assert themselves, either by setting boundaries or by leaving the toxic workplace, the dynamic changes. The boss is forced to either adjust their behavior or lose a valuable worker. The same principle applies to relationships. If you stay in a toxic relationship, allowing someone to manipulate you, disrespect you, or take advantage of you, they have no reason to stop. But if you walk away, you send a clear message: I will not allow myself to be treated this way. This is not about being confrontational. It is about recognizing your worth and refusing to settle for less than you deserve. Boundaries are essential in any relationship, and they are especially important when dealing with toxic individuals. If someone refuses to respect your limits, then they do not deserve a place in your life. A powerful example of this is found in people who have walked away from abusive relationships. Many of them describe the shift that happens once they decide to stop tolerating toxicity. At first, it is difficult. The toxic person may try to guilt trip them, manipulate them, or make them feel unworthy. But once they stand firm in their decision, they begin to regain their self-respect. They start attracting healthier relationships because they have redefined what they will and will not accept. One of the biggest fears people have when setting boundaries is the fear of losing relationships. They worry that if they speak up or demand better treatment, they will be abandoned. But the reality is, the only people who leave when you set boundaries are the ones who benefited from your lack of them, and that is a blessing in disguise. Healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect. If someone truly values you, they will respect your boundaries. They will not demand that you endure mistreatment or sacrifice your well-being for their comfort. On the other hand, toxic people rely on the fact that you are too afraid to walk away. They manipulate your fear of loneliness to keep you trapped in a cycle of mistreatment. This is why being alone is sometimes the best decision you can make. It allows you to reset your standards. When you remove toxicity from your life, you create space for relationships that are based on mutual care, respect, and appreciation. You begin to surround yourself with people who value you rather than those who take you for granted. At the core of it all, self-respect is one of the most powerful things you can possess. When you choose to walk away from toxicity, you are making a statement not just to the toxic person, but to yourself and to the world: I deserve better. And when you truly believe that, your entire life begins to change. One of the most dangerous aspects of a toxic relationship is the slow erosion of your self-worth. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually, often so subtly that you don't even realize it until you're deep in the cycle. Toxic people have a way of making you question your own value, your intelligence, and even your perception of reality. Over time, you begin to feel small, inadequate, and undeserving of better treatment. At first, it may start with little things: offhanded comments, small criticisms, or moments of dismissiveness. Perhaps your partner, friend, or family member frequently downplays your achievements. It's not a big deal, they say when you accomplish something meaningful. Or they make you feel guilty for wanting basic respect. You're too sensitive, they insist, when you express hurt over their words. These small moments add up. They chip away at your confidence until you start doubting yourself. Psychologists refer to this as gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation where a person makes you question your reality, your emotions, and your worth. Over time, you start to believe the toxic person's narrative that you are difficult, that your feelings are unreasonable, that you are somehow the problem. And once you start believing this, it becomes incredibly difficult to leave because you convince yourself that you don't deserve better. Imagine a person who starts a new relationship feeling confident and self-assured, but after months or years of subtle put-downs, dismissals, and emotional neglect, they begin to lose their sense of identity. They stop speaking up for themselves because they believe their voice doesn't matter. They stop pursuing their goals because they've been told they're not good enough. And worst of all, they start to feel that love is something they must earn by tolerating mistreatment. This is the damage toxic relationships inflict. They distort your understanding of love and self-worth. Love should never require you to shrink yourself. It should never demand that you tolerate disrespect in order to feel wanted. Yet toxic individuals make you believe that your value is conditional, that you are only worthy of love if you meet their impossible expectations, stay silent, or endure their mistreatment. The longer you stay in a toxic relationship, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before. And this is why solitude is so powerful. When you choose to be alone rather than stay with someone who damages your self-worth, you give yourself the space to heal. You start to recognize the lies you were told. You begin to rebuild your confidence. Think of it like an old, neglected house. If a house is left in the hands of someone who does nothing but damage it, breaking the windows, tearing apart the walls, letting mold grow, it will eventually fall apart. But if you take the time to repair it, to nurture it, to rebuild it from the ground up, it can become stronger and more beautiful than before. Your self-worth is the same. It requires care, protection, and time away from those who seek to destroy it. At the end of the day, your worth is not defined by how someone else treats you. It is not measured by whether someone chooses to love you or not. You are valuable simply because you exist, and no toxic relationship has the power to take that away, unless you allow it. When you are constantly surrounded by negativity, dysfunction, and mistreatment, it becomes difficult to recognize what healthy relationships actually look like. You become so accustomed to chaos that peace feels foreign. You mistake control for love, manipulation for care, and inconsistency for passion. This is why taking time to be alone is essential. It gives you the chance to reset your standards and learn what you truly deserve. Many people stay in toxic relationships simply because they don't know anything different. If you grew up in a household where love was conditional, where affection had to be earned, or where emotional manipulation was common, then you might unknowingly seek out similar dynamics in adulthood. What feels familiar often feels safe, even if it is unhealthy. But the moment you step away from toxicity and embrace solitude, something remarkable happens. You gain clarity. You start to see just how dysfunctional your previous relationships were. You recognize the red flags you ignored, the ways you were mistreated, and the unhealthy patterns you kept repeating. And most importantly, you realize that you deserve better. Being alone allows you to set new standards for yourself. It gives you time to reflect on what kind of relationships you truly want in your life. Do you want love that feels secure and uplifting, or love that keeps you anxious and uncertain? Do you want friendships that bring joy and mutual support, or ones that drain you emotionally? When you have space to think clearly, the answers become obvious. One of the most liberating realizations people have after leaving a toxic relationship is that they would rather be alone than settle for something unhealthy. At first, solitude may feel uncomfortable, even painful, but over time, it becomes empowering. You no longer feel desperate for someone's validation. You no longer tolerate behavior that doesn't align with your values. And because you have taken the time to understand yourself, you become far more selective about who you allow into your life. Think about people who have gone through breakups with toxic partners. Initially, they might feel heartbroken and alone, but months or years later, they look back and wonder why they stayed as long as they did. With distance, they see the situation clearly. They realize how much they sacrificed for someone who never truly valued them. And they often say, "I will never allow myself to go through that again." This shift in mindset is what ultimately protects you in the future. When you know what you deserve, you no longer accept less. You no longer entertain people who play games, who treat you as an option, or who bring unnecessary negativity into your life. You develop a deep sense of self-respect, and that self-respect attracts healthier, more fulfilling relationships. It is also important to note that when you take time to be alone, you give yourself the chance to build a life that is fulfilling without relying on someone else. Instead of seeking validation from a relationship, you find joy in your own growth. You pursue passions that excite you. You cultivate friendships that nourish you. You create a life that feels whole, so that when the right person does come along, they are adding to your happiness, not becoming the sole source of it. The truth is, being alone is not something to fear. It is an opportunity. It is a chance to break free from unhealthy patterns, to rediscover yourself, and to build a foundation of self-worth so strong that no toxic relationship can ever shake it again. When you take the time to learn what you truly deserve, you protect yourself from settling for anything less. And that is one of the greatest gifts you can ever give yourself. Being alone is not a curse. It's an opportunity. It's a chance to rebuild, to grow, to find peace, and to attract the right kind of people into your life. The alternative, staying in toxicity, is far worse. It drains you, reshapes you into someone you're not, and keeps you from becoming the person you're meant to be. So if you're afraid of walking alone, ask yourself this: would you rather endure the temporary discomfort of solitude or the lifelong pain of staying in a place that dims your light? The answer is clear. Choose yourself, choose growth, choose peace, because the moment you do, your real life begins.